Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Mayday Maggie, for a breakdown of episode 5 for season 2 of Stargirl. I apologize up front, but I have a killer head cold, so this may be a little rough. However, this was an episode that's full of information, so I did want to talk about it. So let's jump in. In the opening of the episode, we have Cindy as a child while she was with her mother. We know that Cindy does go on later to kill her mother, but at this point she has a real fear for her father, who she has not only been dreaming about, but he is in fact watching her. With Cindy being one of the main villains this season as the person that unleashed Eclipso, I think we are going to see her past trauma explored more this season, or at least I hope so. One of the main parts of this episode is the return of Cameron in the story. Cameron is the son of Icicle, and he has been spending his time painting a mural of his father in the center of town. Like most people, he doesn't really know the truth about his father. Cindy attempts to recruit him into her new ISA twice. Once while he's painting, but is stopped in her tracks by Cameron's grandmother, and then a second time in the art studio. Cameron is not an easy target for her. He calls her out on some things she said about her own mother's passing when they were in elementary school, and by the end of the episode she kind of gives up on getting Cameron to her side, but then sets her sights more heavily on Mike. Courtney also talks with Cameron this episode for the first time since the events of last season. We know from the conversation with Cameron and the art teacher, Mr. Dysinger, that Cameron has feelings for Courtney and he does share his drawings with her. They have an almost kiss before she is called away when Beth gets information on Eclipso. However, this is a super awkward time for their friendship and relationship. She knows the truth about his father and he doesn't, which is a pretty big obstacle and something I think will later drive an even bigger wedge between them. When we see Cameron again at the end of the episode, his powers are beginning to emerge, so I'm curious if he will team up with the JSA or will he feel betrayed by them and join the ISA. Moving into the main story, after Courtney's interaction with Shade in the last episode, she begins looking for him in this episode, because she feels like he is one of the only people being honest with her and not holding information back. She thinks he could be a really good ally in the fight against Eclipso, and we know that Pat knows more about what's going on from last episode. We just don't know what that is, but Courtney also really senses that there's more to this story. She doesn't find Shade, but does get caught being out past curfew, and while she kind of gets a pass on that, mostly because Pat feels guilty, he does relay the information to her that he feels that the recent bad weather in Blue Valley is connected to Eclipso. The next day, Shade pays Barbara a visit and warns her to have Courtney and the JSA as a whole to just back off. He makes it clear that he is not like Jordan, who saw Barbara as some token or prize, but he is honestly just on a mission that is in the best interest of everybody, and he would like it if everyone backed off. Barbara, by the end of the conversation, like Courtney, seems to almost agree with Shade, and I imagine she will later be in agreement on a team up with Shade against Eclipso. Meanwhile, Pat, Beth, and Rick are working to not only track the weather patterns for clues, but also discuss the possibility that the original Dr. Midnight, Charles McNider, is still alive. In the last episode, Beth had a brief conversation with him through the goggles and believes that he is still alive. Pat vows that if they have proof that he is alive, they will find him and rescue him, but that they also need to put their focus on stopping Eclipso. The biggest thing that happens in this episode is Eclipso taking over Mr. Dysinger. This happens in the art studio when Cindy's attempting to recruit Cameron. She bumps into Dr. Dysinger, creating that connection for Eclipso, and from there becomes his muse. He obsessively begins painting and is there all day until the JSA arrives after finding that the school is the central location of the bad weather. They do see his car outside, so they head in without waiting for Pat and have their first real face-off with Eclipso. He gets in all of their heads, making them see their greatest fear. For Yolanda, he taunts her with Brainwave and Henry. Beth fears the divorce of her parents, and Rick is scared that he is a monster or more monstrous than Grundy. Only Courtney is untouched by Eclipso, at least in her mind. Instead, she has a physical fight with him. Well, with Mr. Dysinger, who's taken over by Eclipso. She is able to reach out to Mr. Dysinger through Eclipso and frees him by having him reach out to the light in her staff, which does work. He is freed from Eclipso, but in the end is then put in a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. I do think that this is a big clue in the fact that Courtney might not be as susceptible to Eclipso, at least mentally and emotionally, and I think it's a connection with the staff, her connection with the staff, that's stopping that. Pat is very concerned that Eclipso had this much power over Dysinger without him having the stone. This means that Eclipso's strength is growing immensely. Some other things that happened in the episode were Mike and Pat having a moment where Pat decides to let Mike in a little more into the JSA by working on a project together. I think Pat knows exactly how Mike feels because he too was kind of the powerless sidekick, but at the same time is concerned about his safety. I hope that this small gesture means that he won't become a member of the ISA, but Cindy is going to be coming after Mike pretty hard to recruit him. And then by the end of the episode, Beth also confronts her parents about the divorce papers, and they do admit that they have talked about it, but nothing is for sure yet. So she's really faced her fears by the end of the episode and confronting them. So that's the basic breakdown for the episode. My thoughts on what's going to happen. I do think it's likely that at some point the JSA is going to team up with Shade. I think it's been made pretty clear that Shade wasn't always in league with ISA, that they just had some brief aligning interest. So I think that Shade, while I think he's more like a neutral character where he only does things that are part of his mission. So I think that stopping Eclipso is definitely part of his mission. So while his interests align with the JSA, they will work together. I think that all of this is connected in some way to Dr. Midnight and becoming missing. I think he was probably connected with Dr. Midnight's disappearance, because we know that there's already a connection with Eclipso and Dr. Midnight because he was the one that took her at the very beginning of episode 1. So for now, while all these storylines seem separate, I do think that they are all going to converge here in the next couple episodes as we head into like the mid-season, 13 episode season, and we're already to episode 5. I imagine that there's going to be some pinnacle moment coming up very soon. But that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and follow my page for more video breakdowns of Stargirl and other comic book shows.